Margaret Williams gave everything to her 3 children: her money, her house, her heart. When arthritis crippled her hands and eviction notices arrived, she called them for help. All 3 had changed their numbers. 3 years later, she inherited $47 million and returned for revenge. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Margaret Williams sat in her cold, empty apartment, staring at the eviction notice in her trembling hands. At 72, she had given everything to her 3 children, David, Sarah, and Michael. She had worked 2 jobs to put them through college, sold her jewelry to pay for their weddings, and borrowed against her small house to help them start their businesses. Now, when arthritis made her hands shake and her heart medication cost more than her pension, they were nowhere to be found. "Mom, we can't keep giving you money," David had said during their last phone call 6 months ago. "You need to learn to manage better." Sarah had been even colder. "We have our own families now, Mom. You can't expect us to take care of you forever." Michael, her youngest, hadn't even returned her calls. The landlord knocked again. "Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry, but if you can't pay by tomorrow, you'll have to leave." Margaret looked around her tiny apartment, the place she'd moved to after selling her house to help Michael's failing restaurant. The same restaurant that was now thriving, though he'd never acknowledged her sacrifice. That night, she called each of her children one last time. "The number you have dialed is not in service," came David's automated message. He had changed his number. Sarah's phone went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Sarah. If this is about money or problems, please don't leave a message." Michael's wife answered. "Oh, hi Margaret. Michael is busy. Can I take a message? Please tell him his mother is being evicted tomorrow. I have nowhere to go." "Oh, well, maybe you should call social services. I'm sure they have programs for people in your situation." The line went dead. Margaret spent the next 3 years moving between homeless shelters and the streets. Her health deteriorated rapidly. The woman who had once been a proud school teacher, who had raised 3 successful children, was now invisible to the world. She would sometimes sit outside David's law office, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Once she saw him getting into his BMW with his family. She called out, but he looked right through her, as if she were just another homeless person asking for change. At Sarah's upscale neighborhood, security guards would chase her away. "No loitering, ma'am." Michael's restaurant was the cruelest. She would smell the food she couldn't afford and remember teaching him to cook in their old kitchen. The hostess would always say, "I'm sorry, but this establishment has a dress code." One winter night, Margaret collapsed outside a church. The pastor found her and rushed her to the hospital. "Do you have any family we can call?" the nurse asked. Margaret whispered 3 phone numbers she still knew by heart. David's secretary answered. "Mr. Williams is in court. Can I take a message? This is the General Hospital. His mother, Margaret Williams, is in critical condition." I'll pass along the message." Sarah's number was disconnected. At Michael's restaurant, his manager answered. "Sorry, he's in the middle of dinner service. Can you call back in a few hours? This is about his mother. She's dying." "Oh, well, he's really busy tonight. Maybe try again tomorrow?" Margaret recovered barely. But something inside her had changed. The love that had sustained her through decades of sacrifice had transformed into something harder, more determined. 6 months later, Margaret received a letter that would change everything. A lawyer named Mr. Harrison visited her at the shelter. "Mrs. Williams, I've been searching for you for months. I have incredible news about your late brother Thomas." Margaret was confused. "Thomas? But he disappeared 30 years ago. We thought he was dead." "He moved to Alaska and struck oil on land he'd purchased. He never married, never had children. His will leaves everything to his only living relative, you. Mrs. Williams, you've inherited $47 million. Margaret stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. "I assure you it's very real. However, there are conditions. Your brother specified that the inheritance must remain secret for 1 year. During this time, you can observe how people treat you when they believe you have nothing. After 1 year, you can choose how to distribute the wealth." Thomas had always been the smart one, Margaret thought. Even in death, he was protecting her. Margaret used a small portion of the money to hire a private investigator and to rent a modest apartment under a false name. She wanted to watch her children, to understand who they had become. What she discovered broke her heart all over again. David was not just successful, he was ruthless. She watched him foreclose on an elderly man's home, the same age she had been when she was evicted. The man begged David to reconsider, explaining that his wife was in chemotherapy. "Business is business. David had said coldly. You should have planned better. Sarah was running a charity for disadvantaged women, but was embezzling most of the donations for her luxury lifestyle. Margaret watched her turn away a pregnant teenager who needed help. We're full, Sarah lied while she planned her third vacation to Europe that year. Michael had fired 3 elderly employees to cut costs, even though his restaurant was more profitable than ever. One of the men had worked there for 15 years. We need younger energy, Michael had told a reporter. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions. Margaret realized that her children hadn't just abandoned her. They had become people she didn't recognize. People she had somehow raised but who possessed no trace of the values she had tried to instill. On a cold December morning, exactly 1 year after inheriting the fortune, Margaret walked into David's law office. She wore an expensive suit and carried herself with the dignity she had never truly lost. The receptionist barely looked up. Do you have an appointment? Tell David Williams that Margaret Williams is here to see him. The receptionist's attitude changed when she saw Margaret's expensive appearance. Of course, let me check his schedule. David appeared within minutes, his practiced lawyer's smile faltering when he recognized her. Mom? Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you. Margaret studied her eldest son's face. Even now, faced with the mother he had abandoned, his first instinct was to lie. Have you, David? Your secretary seemed very efficient at taking messages last year when I was dying in the hospital. David's face went pale. Mom, I can explain. No need. I'm here on business. I'm looking for legal representation for a significant inheritance matter. $47 million. David's eyes widened and Margaret saw something that disgusted her. Not love, not relief that she was alive, but pure greed. Mom, of course. Family first. Let me clear my schedule. We have so much to catch up on. Margaret repeated similar scenes with Sarah and Michael. Both immediately transformed from cold strangers into loving children the moment money was mentioned. Sarah actually cried fake tears. Mom, I've been so worried. I changed my number because of stalkers from my charity work. I've been trying to find you. Michael closed his restaurant early to spend time with her. Mom, you look amazing. That homeless shelter must have really taken care of you. I'm so sorry I couldn't take your calls. The restaurant business is crazy, you know? For 1 month, Margaret enjoyed being the center of her children's attention. They called daily, visited weekly, and competed to show her the most affection. David offered to manage her money. Sarah wanted her to donate to her charity. Michael suggested she invest in expanding his restaurant. None of them asked about her 3 years on the street. None of them apologized for abandoning her. None of them seemed to notice or care about the pain in her eyes or the way her hands still shook from the trauma of those cold, hungry nights. They loved her money, not her. Margaret scheduled a family dinner at Michael's restaurant on New Year's Eve. She had told each child to bring their families. She had something important to announce about her inheritance. The restaurant was closed to other customers. Her 3 children and their families gathered around a large table, all smiles and eager anticipation. Margaret stood and raised her glass. I want to thank you all for this wonderful month we've shared. It's reminded me so much of the old days when family meant everything. David beamed. Mom, you've always been the heart of our family. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. We love you so much, Mom. Michael added, you're the most important thing in our lives. Margaret smiled sadly. That's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about love lately. About what it means, what it costs, what it's worth. She walked to the window and pointed outside. Do you see that homeless shelter across the street? They all turned to look. I spent 2 years there. 2 years sleeping on a cot, eating soup from a kitchen, wearing donated clothes. 2 years invisible to the world. The room grew quiet. Margaret continued, I would sit by that window watching this restaurant where my youngest son worked, hoping he might look out and see me. Hoping any of you might see me. David started to speak, but Margaret held up her hand. David, last year I watched you foreclose on Mr. Peterson's home while his wife was dying of cancer. The same cancer I had, alone in a charity ward. David's face went white. Sarah, I saw you turn away a pregnant girl who needed help while you planned another European vacation with money stolen from your charity. Sarah began to cry real tears now. Michael, you fired 3 elderly employees including Mr. Rodriguez who has grandchildren to feed. Men the same age I was when you stopped taking my calls. The room was silent except for Sarah's sobbing. Margaret walked back to the table. I inherited $47 million 13 months ago. For 1 year, I watched you all while you believed I was dead or didn't care that I might be. I learned who you really are. She opened her purse and pulled out 3 envelopes. David, your envelope contains a check for $1 and the foreclosure papers for Mr. Peterson's house, which I bought and am returning to him. David's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Sarah, yours contains a check for $1 and documentation showing that your charity embezzlement has been reported to the authorities. The money you stole has been returned to actual charities that help women in need. Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Michael, your envelope contains a check for $1 and the deed to this building which I purchased. Your lease expires tomorrow. The space will become a free community kitchen for the homeless. Michael stared at the papers in disbelief. Margaret looked at each of her children. The rest of the money is going to establish the Thomas Williams Foundation for Abandoned Elderly. It will help other parents who have been discarded by their children, just like I was. David found his voice first. Mom, please. We made mistakes, but we're still your children. Blood is thicker than water. Margaret looked at him with eyes that held decades of wisdom and recent years of pain. You're right, David. But you know what the full quote is? The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means that chosen bonds are stronger than family bonds. You chose to abandon me. I'm choosing to abandon you. Sarah reached out desperately. Mom, we can change. Give us another chance. I gave you 67 years of chances, Sarah. I gave you my youth, my money, my house, my health, and my heart. When I had nothing left to give, you threw me away. Michael stood up angrily. You can't do this. We're your family. Margaret looked at her youngest child, the boy she had sung to sleep, the young man she had sacrificed everything to help. No, Michael. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't let their mother starve on the streets. Family doesn't change their phone numbers to avoid their aging parents' calls. She walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. I spent 3 years learning what it feels like to be thrown away. I spent 1 year watching you all prove that you only love money, not me. Now you'll spend the rest of your lives learning what it feels like to lose the most important thing you never valued. As she reached the door, David called out desperately, Mom, what are we supposed to do? Margaret paused, her hand on the doorknob. What I did when you abandoned me. Survive. Learn. Hope that someday you might become the people I thought I raised you to be. Margaret Williams sat in her comfortable apartment, reading thank you letters from elderly people who had been helped by the Thomas Williams Foundation. She had found peace in helping others avoid the fate she had endured. Her phone rang. It was David. Mom, I've been calling for 2 years. I know you won't answer, but I need you to know. I've changed. I've really changed. I help elderly clients for free now. I think about you every day. Margaret listened to the voicemail, one of hundreds her children had left. Sarah's most recent message, Mom, I'm in therapy. I'm working at a real shelter now, helping women like you helped everyone your whole life. I understand now what I lost. Michael's voice broken. Mom, I sell the restaurant. I'm cooking at a homeless shelter. Every meal I make, I think about you being hungry. I'm so sorry. Margaret saved each message but never responded. Some wounds cut too deep for simple apologies to heal. Some lessons come too late to matter. But sometimes, late at night, she would play the messages and wonder if redemption was possible for anyone, even for the children who had broken her heart. The story had no perfect ending because real love, real loss, and real consequences never do. But Margaret Williams had learned the most important lesson of all. She had finally learned to value herself the way she had always valued others. And in that small apartment, surrounded by letters from strangers whose lives she had saved, the abandoned mother had found something her children never gave her. Peace.